So brilliantly, last time we spoke to you, Dave, to talk about Coventry. It was the end of last year. You just put new chapters in your book, and you hadn't been to a game for a while. No one had been to a game for a while. And now Coventry are getting coaches sacked elsewhere. It must be a great time to be a Bears fan.
Yeah, this season has been fantastic, actually. I mean, aside from actually just getting back to watching games, like you can see real progress in the squad. Obviously, the results speak for themselves. Last Sunday's one was just ridiculous. I mean, I've watched the highlights. I've got my notes in front of me. Still don't really comprehend what happened, but yeah, it's a really positive vibe about the team this year. And even the games we've lost, it's very different to previous years. You're looking at it thinking we could have won those games. Yeah, it's just a joy to have everything back. Even when things have gone wrong or where there've been things to complain about, that just feels normal. So it's nice to have it back, and it's nice to be watching such a talented bunch of lads who are really building something together there, actually.
I mean, I've got to ask you this question. I don't think you can answer it then. How did it happen? How did that comeback happen on Sunday?
Well, like I said, I mean, I've still not quite comprehended it. And this is having gone through the highlights, done all the stuff on social media, recorded our own podcast trying to analyze it, and reading my notes again. I mean, it just shows you, I mean, momentum is massive in any sport, right? But in rugby league, it really seems to have an effect. And you combine that momentum, self-belief, quite savvy use of the interchanges from the Bears side as well, in terms of matching their fitness up against perhaps where Hunslet were lacking in the last 10 minutes. But other than that, it was just a bit of gold dust, a bit of magic. And it was crazy, absolutely crazy to see it happening.
Apart from feeling incredibly underdressed in the hair department while this is being recorded, almost conventional by comparison, I think you've now upset a long-time fan of the show, Rod Studd, by using the M word. And it's great to have commentary of him back on the darts. I think we want to say good luck to him and hope to hear from him on Rugby League again soon. I think this is a bigger story, though, than just one result. And a lot of the things we've seen coming out of what Coventry are doing, and some of it obviously built around the World Cup, which we're all still hoping will go ahead as planned, has been the junior development. And I think a lot of that goes unnoticed outside of the city. I know clearly Alan Robinson is a massive advocate of it and is often posting on social media about it. But clearly you have a lot of juniors playing the game on the back of what the senior team are doing. And is it 4 clubs have been set up this summer? And now
3 new ones, yeah.
Yeah, 3 in and around the city, and linking into others in the West Midlands. That's almost as big a story as beating Hunslet, isn't it?
If anything, it's a bigger story. I mean, obviously the Hunslet result is going to turn heads, not just because of the outcome, but of the way it happened. But you're absolutely right. What the Bears have been building this season is nothing short of fantastic, considering they are something of an outpost in terms of the spread of the game across the country. And as has been documented across the last few years for the Bears, you know, that they take it very seriously. They make sure every penny is accounted for, and there's always a solid plan and a solid structure behind everything they do. And they've had an excellent youth system for a number of years, but I think where the trouble has been is that those youth teams have often struggled to have any meaningful opposition that are less than 2 hours drive away. And you know, getting the funding that they've got from the World Cup Legacy Fund has enabled them to set up those 3 clubs. So we've got one in Coventry, one sort of just in Warwickshire, but still close to the Coventry border, and one out into Birmingham as well. And it's been fantastic. You know, you've got more than 220 players signed up. I think more than 30 coaches. Most of those are volunteers. And they've been able to have games against each other. We had a team from Shrewsbury come over a couple of weeks ago and play our alphas to the Coventry team. And it's really positive. Loads of kids engaging with the sport. And then on top of that, you've got the Bears going into local schools and delivering PE lessons to, I think it's more than 1,000 school kids across Coventry since April now. So there's so many young people getting involved with rugby league in the region now. And with the Bears sitting at the top of it, I guess there's two sides to it. Like, it's a lot of work for the Bears, and I think they'd massively appreciate some support in terms of being able to grow more clubs in the region. And you look back to a few years ago where we also had the All Golds and Oxford, and there's always been sort of teams on the east side of the Midlands as well that have threatened to do something. And it's quite tough for the Bears being at the top of that pyramid, but at the same time, it's also a very real pathway for players who are perhaps picking up a ball now and looking at where it might lead them. I mean, the Bears' record try scorer is a product of their youth system. That's Hayden Freeman. You've got other players who have caught the attention of people whilst playing for the Bears, who've gone up into higher steps up in the game as well. And there's no reason to think why in 10 years from now we might be looking at a Bears team featuring players who first picked up a ball this year playing for one of those satellite clubs. It's really exciting, and it doesn't get talked about anywhere near enough, the work that the Bears are doing in the community, and they really do put so much into it, and it's just fantastic to see, and it makes you really proud to be involved with the club.
So on the back of what you've just said, two things strike me. One is that this is all without external funding. It's an initiative that is driven by the Bears and needs to wash its face, and always has done. And we can't do that in what might be termed more traditional areas at the moment, which is why, for example, keeping clubs like Coventry going in a division like League One is so important. It has to be part of any strategic plan that those who are allegedly sitting around a table are supposed to be coming up with. And word, of course, is that League One may disappear as a result of that. This is a case for saying it can't. And the other thing that has to tie into that is time. Because you mentioned again, it might take 10 years or whatever it might be, how long it has taken for a club that started off in the days of the Rugby League Conference, the sort of early 2000s, really, finding its feet. We're already 20 odd years into a development plan in Coventry, in the Coventry area, linked into what may or may not be happening in the university game at Warwick and at Coventry University as well. This is something that you cannot expect overnight success. Would you say that Rugby League needs to get out of this idea that unless there is a return tomorrow, we have to change and do something different?
Absolutely. I think that's something that the sport is massively lacking in this country, is that confidence to have some long-term planning and that strategic thought behind it as well. I was listening to another Rugby League podcast earlier this week, which featured the Speaker of the House of Commons, and he was talking about exactly this needing to get people invested in it for the long term and actually be willing to plan for the long term and commit for the long term. And yeah, absolutely, you can't. The state that the sport's in at the moment, if you're only going in for a quick win, you're only going to serve the people who are already happy with the way things are. And if the sport is serious about growing, about expanding, then it needs to allow itself time for these things to happen. And yeah, I mean, Coventry have put in a lot of work over their just over 20-year history. And like you say, it's just starting to really break through now. These things take time. All good things take time, and they shouldn't be rushed. There needs to be that, like I say, that confidence to really allow it to grow and take the time to do it properly.
I don't want to say it's easier when you've got a winning team in situ, but obviously Coventry are a team who they don't win as much as they lose, but it does seem that the supporters that you have are very realistic of the aims of the club, of what the first team are doing. You mentioned, the effort's been there in the defeats. You can see signs of growth and getting close to that win, and obviously the win at the weekend. It does seem that there's a sense of realism around Coventry and how to build the club that perhaps is missing from some more traditional clubs in our area in the north, rather than where you are down in the Midlands.
That our small band of loyal supporters, as it was put earlier this week. Yeah, I think we are. I think it's partly a Midlands thing. I think people in the Midlands are quite, I don't want to say humble, because that maybe sounds disparaging to other people, but I think realistic is a good word, and you often have to dig to find out about good stuff in the Midlands, whereas perhaps in the capital or in the Northwest, people are much more willing to shout about it. But I think when it comes to the Bears fans, first and foremost, they love the game, they love the sport, and there has always been a connection between the fans and the team. You know, any time you come to a Bears game, full-time whistle, whatever the result, the players are straight over to the fans interacting. You know, there's good friendships built there between fans and supporters. And we were talking about it on our Bears podcast this week. You know, there's never a sense of criticism from the Bears fans, and there's never a real pressure from them. It's always supporting. Even in those games where we've been well beaten, it's always been a positive vibe from the crowd. And yeah, I think they are realistic, but like I say, they love the sport, they want to see it grow. And just having the opportunity to see it on their doorstep is a massive thing. And I know from my point of view, I really appreciate having a rugby league club a 10-minute drive away. It does make a massive difference. And yeah, just love seeing what the club are doing.
And I guess in a sense, it would be much easier for the club to spend whatever money they have and bring in players from the north or wherever, or from Australia, and try and finish 1-2 places higher in the table. But to put that money into development is a much better thing, not just for Coventry, but the sport as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, we've seen over the last couple of years, the club have tried different approaches to recruitment. So 2018, there was a lot of focus on getting more Midlands-based players, so making more use of the student game, and giving those sorts of players opportunities. This year, we've built quite a strong connection with Hull, which is nice, given that Coventry is the city of culture and Hull was the previous city of culture. But we've got a lot of players and members of the coaching staff who are linked to that part of the world as well. So this year is a bit more sort of bringing together a band of brothers from all over the country, but uniting them under the Coventry shirt. But yeah, it's very much about looking for players who are willing to buy into the philosophy of the club and willing to to just wear that shirt with pride and go about things in the right way. You're right, you know, that would potentially be an easier option. Just find somebody with deep pockets and see what difference it would make. But that's never been the Bears' approach, and they've always been committed to growing the game as much as growing their own club, and I think that's admirable.
I think we've talked a lot in the past on this podcast, and it's a debate that still happens on a regular basis, that perhaps one of the reasons London has been nomadic and unsustainable over a long period of time in the 40 years that they've been there is the selfishness perhaps of some of the other Super League clubs to steal their best talent and not give them any dispensation for A, producing it, and B, what advantage it would have if it actually stayed where it was. Is that a concern, that for every great result you have against a Hunslet, somebody comes along, looks at these great young players that you're producing from the Midlands and goes, right, we'll cherry pick A, B, C and D, and then you always end up staying where you are?
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously those kind of results do turn heads, and people who've been paying attention, that, you know, I'm hesitant to read any names out now in case people are listening as to who the Bears' best players are this year. But yeah, I've seen it happen over the last few years. You see players have a good run in the team, and then they're picked up and go elsewhere. But I guess part of that is for where the Bears are at right now. That is part of their purpose, is to get these players through, get them competing, get them up to standard, and then, you know, moving them on to bigger opportunities with the club's blessing. And this year, actually, it's less of a concern because we've got a really good squad this year. And I think that's been a key part to bring it back to last Sunday. That was a key part of the game, was that whereas previous years, you know, we looked to our interchange bench and perhaps there wasn't much on there that would make a difference, and certainly being able to turn around 22 points in 10 minutes. This season, we have got real talent, and across the squad, we've got competition for every single position. Like it's genuinely a surprise when you see the team sheet each week this season, because everyone has staked a claim for it. So there may well be players who get spotted this year and go on to a higher opportunity, and if they've performed enough to deserve that, then great. That's brilliant, and I think the Bears are always proud to be part of somebody's history. But because we're doing things in the right way this year, I think we are attracting a good standard of player to come through and play for us as well. So we do have that depth this year. So it's an unusually fortunate position for us, I think.
You say you don't want to pick anybody out, and it would be invidious to do so after such a performance. But how important has having David Scott around the place been this year? Because obviously he will still harbour ambitions to play for Scotland in the World Cup, and let's hope he does. He's got experience of all the levels of the game, and certainly is a massive coup for a club like Coventry to get somebody like him not only on the field organising, but I suspect involved in the coaching side of things as well with Richard Knight. How much of an influence has David been?
He has been fantastic. So you're right. He has joined the club in a player coach capacity, and he's taken up a position in the halves from week one of this season, and has been hugely influential. His leadership on the pitch has been fantastic. He's really helped build. He's built this partnership with Dan Coates, who is our other half, who we got from Newcastle in the off season. And between them, they are comfortably the best halfback partnership I've seen in a Bears shirt. And he has really set the tone for this season. He's been reliable in every single game. I think he's still our top try scorer. We had Jack Dawson score a hat trick on Sunday, which I think puts him in strong competition with Dave for the title of top try scorer. But yeah, he has been fantastic. His decision making, his attack, his defensive creativity, but yeah, the coaching side as well. I'm fortunate to chat to him after every game for the podcast, and he's really grounded, really, really thoughtful about the game, and him and Rich Squires together are putting together a really strong coaching partnership. But it's not just Dave as well. I mean, we've got Liam and Matty Wellham in the centres who are doing great things for us. We've been able to bring back Brad Clavering, who has made a massive difference through the middle as well. And then we've got players who have been playing for the Bears for a few years, like Kieran Sheraton and Peter Ryan, who have really stepped up and taken on an extra bit of leadership this year. And I think that's what feels really different this year, is we do seem to have a core of leaders on the pitch at any one time, but Dave is absolutely one of them. And yeah, I mean, the prospect of not only him going on and playing in the World Cup, but playing for Scotland in a World Cup game in Coventry when he's had a terrific season at the Bears. I mean, we're all so excited about that, and fingers crossed it can happen.
I was just about to ask you, how excited are you for the World Cup? Because obviously not just Scotland, but the world champions Australia coming as well. It would be a great atmosphere. I mean, we were both there for the Four Nations, which seems like a long time ago now. At the recon, it probably was, but that was a great night. And the World Cup's been organised, I expect it to be another great night there for that Australia versus Scotland game. Yeah.
I mean, we've been thrilled since that draw came out and we saw what game we'd got coming to our part of the world. Everyone has just been buzzing about it, and yeah, I mean, that Four Nations doubleheader from a few years ago was great. Hopefully, it won't quite be as cold as it was that night, because I remember it being absolutely freezing. But yeah, I mean, I think all we wanted was one of the big teams, and to get the biggest team, and then to get an underdog who, like the Bears have often been, the crowd can really get behind and really support on the night. And if there's Bears interest in there as well, then even better. But yeah, I think hopefully it happens this year. If we have to wait a bit longer, whatever, it's going to be fantastic. And Coventry is a city that loves its sport. So, there's going to be a lot of people there who are probably being exposed to rugby league for the first time, like it was with the doubleheader a few years ago. And that's going to be terrific as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, we're still waiting to see what will happen, but no one knows what's going to happen from day to day. So we just, what will be, will be. We all hope it will be this year, but we'll just have to just get on with it, whatever happens. I should ask you for some tips on City of Culture, because Wakefield are bidding for it, apparently. I mean, I don't know how we're going to get it, but we've got a museum and an art gallery now. So I don't know what advantages Coventry has as a City of Culture that Wakefield doesn't at the minute. But any advice?
A sports centre shaped like an elephant, and who could want more? I
mean, our sports centre's closed down, so that's not good. That's not good.
we've got the specials as well, which I don't know if that helped at all.
I think we've got the cribs. And we had Bebop Deluxe, but they're way before my time, so I don't know anything about them. But back on to Rugby League. Phil's mentioned the potential realignment of the Championship and League One. From a Coventry perspective, as a supporter, how do you see that? And what shape would you like to see for Rugby League outside of Super League going forward?
It's a massive question, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult to think about it at the moment without just panicking that it's all going to be taken away, and that all of this work that, as we were talking about earlier, is really starting to bear fruit this season. It almost gets not turned into nothing, but it forces the club to sort of go back to the drawing board almost. I think it's the perennial question of like, does the game just want to serve those who like those clubs in the north of England who are sort of quite happy with looking after themselves, or is it serious about developing and growing the game and spreading the reach of the game? And as somebody who was obviously grown up in a non-rugby league area and came to the game in my early 20s, I guess I've got a slightly different perspective on it in terms of looking at the sport and looking at its ambitions. And to me, it just seems, particularly in a World Cup year, when you look at clubs like Coventry and what London Scholars are doing, and teams like North Wales Crusaders and even West Wales, I know they're struggling this year, but there's definitely potential there. If this is a sport that wants to grow and wants to compete for eyeballs and compete for investment and compete for participants, then you've got to look at the opportunities that the Championship and League One can afford it to do exactly that. And like I said earlier, a few years ago, we had a bigger geographical spread in the league, and League One was sort of set up to help these clubs get into the professional pyramid, as it were. And it still feels like the right way to go about it, but it's got to be funded. You can't expect these clubs to work miracles on absolute peanuts. And yeah, it's difficult across the board because all signs point to money dropping in the sport at the moment, and it's a difficult one from top to bottom. But I don't know, from my point of view, even trying to take my obvious bias out of it, it feels like the obvious thing to do to grow the sport is to look at League One in particular and see how it can be used to develop these teams, and maybe even stop calling them expansion teams in inverted commas, and just let them be teams, just let them be part of the system, and just give them the opportunity to show what they can do, because spoiler alert, they might do some really good stuff.
I think the other side of that coin that you've just spun in the air is that we should stop calling teams Heartland as well. I think, again, people will forget that Coventry had a side from 1910 through to 1913, so they're as much a Heartland team, even though reborn as brand bears, as any, well, a lot of the others. Clearly, you're making waves in and around the sport, but do you have a full page back feature on the Coventry Evening Telegraph every time you play? Is Mercia Sound coming and featuring your games, if indeed it still exists?
Mercia Sound, they're all Hearts these days, Phil, dearie me.
Oh, for goodness sake. I used to write sports bulletins for Mercia Sound. How is the local media taking to what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I think you could probably guess the answer, Phil. And the Telegraph has always been a difficult one for us to get any coverage in. I honestly can't remember the last time we got any meaningful coverage in the Telegraph, which is a shame. The Coventry Observer does great things for us. We've been on the back page every week this season. That has a smaller reach than the Telegraph. And in terms of other media outlets, we've had a couple of instances, certainly in the time I've been more involved as a volunteer at the club. The couple of pre-season games we've had against the Rhinos, that's caused a bit of a stir. And yeah, very occasionally, perhaps when nothing else has been on, and the Bears have managed to grind out a victory on a weekend when perhaps the Sky Blues weren't doing something, or Coventry Rugby hadn't started, and the local media might just pay attention. But it's been tough. We've had to make our own noise. We've had to make our own headlines. But it's the excuse that's always given is that it's everything is based on clicks now, and all the local media outlets seem to be absolutely certain that any coverage of rugby league would not generate clicks from their readers. but when you ask them what they base that on, they've never actually tried it. So it all just seems to be a bit of a gut instinct, which is really frustrating because we've got so many good stories to tell. But yeah, it's often like pushing against a closed door, really. Trying to get some support locally, which is a real shame.
And just in terms of facilities, Rich and I have been fortunate enough to be down and watch the game live down there. But to those who haven't, would it be safe to say you've got a boutique state-of-the-art stadium that, you know, particularly would lend itself to the Championship if you were to be in a position to get promoted? And that, again, is one of the things that has been a really hard-working strategic decision to be playing at somewhere where you can be extremely proud of, call home, and actually, you know, is above spec for the level that you're playing at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And actually, since you guys came down last, there's a new pitch there now. So it's a top of the range 4G pitch. So you know, barring any super extreme weather, we should be good to go at whatever point in the calendar. But yeah, it's a terrific ground, really good facilities. Absolutely would be a match for certainly most of the grounds I've been fortunate to visit over the last few years. And again, there's potential for it to build there as well. And you know, what I'd love to see, actually, because that ground is Coventry Rugby Union's ground. And I think what was really eye-opening for me a few years ago, I went up to Newcastle to watch the Bears play the Thunder, and seeing the real partnership between the two codes up in Newcastle there, it just feels like there's real potential to do something similar in Coventry as well, and try and build that crossover between the fans and really make that ground a real hotbed of rugby for both codes. You know, it's a stone's throw from the city centre. In more normal times, you get loads of walk-ups come on match day as well as people who come every week. So yeah, there's real potential there. There's probably as much potential on that side of things as there is for the Bears in general, really. It's all sort of interwoven and all very well thought out. And you know, if somebody in the game is willing to give them a chance, they could do some really exciting things.
So Coventry were smart enough to invite all the big media heavy hitters down there a couple of years ago. Dave Woods was there, Rod Studd. I was there because Mark couldn't go. So yeah, doing the right thing, shaking hands with the right people. Smart club. Other clubs should take advantage of that. On a non-rugby league point, Dave, did I say you've written a book? Are you an all? Is this a new thing you've got into? What's this? I saw you holding up a book.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So I'm now a published author of horror fiction. So I have my first short story in a horror fiction collection. It's put out by a company who I'm sort of connected with on Instagram, a guy who started it in the pandemic last year and wanted to support the horror community. And it was being edited by a couple of people I'm quite friendly with, and I just thought I'd submit a story to support them, really. And then they picked it. So yeah, it's in a book. So I'm now a non-fiction and fiction author, which is quite surreal. I'm not entirely sure where I found the time to do it, to be honest, but yeah, there we go.
Oh, I had plenty of plans during the pandemic and did none of them. So you know, at least you come out with something. So that's good. Is there any crossover between rugby league and horror that you can think of? You know, bar some score lines.
I mean, yes, is the short answer. There's probably a whole collection of rugby league horror stories waiting to be written, really, particularly over the last year or so. Trying to think of something witty off the top of my head. You throw me now, but yes, would be the short answer.
Well, no, that was very much a hospital pass there to you. So you dealt with that one quite well. Didn't knock it on, so that's good. Well, as we run out of time, as invariably do, because like the RFL when they had Sean Wayne on the presser the other week, we haven't paid for the extra money on Zoom. We'll get into that, Phil.
One last point to make. I mean, we talked about some of the stalwarts on the field, but really we probably should mention one off it, and that's Alan Robinson. Been absolutely steadfast in the way he wants this club to run. Economically, probably as sound as any rugby league club out there at the moment, self-sustaining, won't spend what he can't generate. Went to university in Coventry and found rugby league probably longer than he'd care to remember, but has stayed loyal to the city and the sport, put in a hell of a lot of his own time, effort and money and still there banging the drum. Again, the more Alan Robinsons we have in the sport, the better the sport would be.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more I can add to what you've just said, Phil. He's an incredible character. He popped around to drop off a hard drive for me yesterday with some of the highlights from the weekend, and we were just having a quick chat. And yeah, I'm just fascinated by him as a man. I mean, you see him some points on match days, and you can see the weight of the club on his shoulders. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's a mixture of entertaining or terrifying to sit anywhere near during a game, depending on how you like to enjoy watching sport. But he is the heartbeat of that club. And like you say, the more Alan Robinson's in the game, the better it would be. And shout out to his fiancée, Debbie Watson, as well, who drives a lot of the community work and is our CEO and does a lot of the business side as well. I mean, you barely see her on match days because she's so busy. But she is another key factor as to why the club is where it is right now. And yeah, what a household. And they've got 3 kids as well. So, they're all in the juniors setup. So lots more Robinsons to come, hopefully.
Far too much positivity this morning spoken. It's not good for us. Dave, where can we find you? Where can we find your things?
So the most relevant one to this conversation would be Bear Necessities podcast, which is now the official Coventry Bears podcast. So just in all your favourite podcast providers or at coventrybears.com. And then if you want to see pictures of Stephen King books, I'm on Instagram, but that's probably not of interest to most people listening.
Oh, I don't know. We've got a very varied and very culture-filled audience, haven't we, Phil? I think.
Absolutely. Mr. Hannon will be making his way straight to your short story. He loves Hammer horror.
Well, there we go. I'm also in a very shouty rock and metal band as well, if anyone's particularly interested in that. We're called Chapter 19. I do everything that isn't drums. So, yeah, like to keep busy,
These people are talented, Phil. They really annoy me when they can do everything and I can barely, speak. But oh dear. Dave, thank you very much for your time as ever. Fingers crossed now. Obviously everything's apparently getting back to normal in a couple of weeks. We may well be able to meet up and actually speak in person, which would be nice. Whether that's in Coventry or somewhere else, but it's great to speak to you. It's always great to hear about what's going on. Far away lands like the Midlands. And congratulations on the win at the weekend, and hopefully more to come this season.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks both for having me.
And I'll buy you a pint at the Anchor if it still exists.
Sounds good.